Most goal scorers can't tell you whether they scored last week, let alone last year. Tony Cottee can give you chapter and verse on every one of his 236 goals. He's an avid collector of goals, 7 in his last 6 games. It's the kind of strike rate that football managers will always pay good money for.
Tony Cottee left Rob Jones flat out in agony after a horrible late challenge. The red card was immediate, but this moment of madness was just one chapter in a career built on record-breaking goals, yet destroyed. Cottee scored 226 league goals across his career, an exceptional achievement by any measure, yet his journey was defined by one controversy after another, starting with a transfer that changed everything. In August 1988, Everton paid a British record fee of £2.2 million to bring Cottee from West Ham. This was not just a signing, it was an institutional statement. Everton had been deposed by Liverpool the previous season and desperately wanted the title back. Cottee was seen as the missing piece, the prolific goalscorer who could fire them to glory. He was only 23 years old, but carried the weight of an entire club's ambition on his shoulders. His debut was extraordinary. Cottee scored a hat-trick against Newcastle United in a 4-0 victory. He needed just 34 seconds to register his first goal. The crowd erupted. The investment seemed justified, but this spectacular start created impossible expectations. When the season ended, Everton finished 8th in Division 1. Cottee had scored 10 league goals. It should have been respectable. Instead, it was viewed as failure. The £2.2 million price tag meant everything he did was measured against an unrealistic standard. This pressure never went away during his 6 years at Goodison Park. The combination of instant stardom and massive financial outlay created a professional challenge that would haunt Cottee throughout his time on Merseyside. The weight of being British football's most expensive player cannot be understated. Every touch was scrutinised, every miss was magnified, every goal was expected rather than celebrated. Cottee had arrived as a traditional high-output English centre-forward. He had broken into the West Ham team as a 17-year-old and achieved formidable productivity, including 23 goals the season before his move. His pedigree was clear, but at Everton, his consistent goal-scoring proved insufficient to restore title-winning glory or maintain harmony within the squad. The promise of that opening salvo, that electrifying debut hat-trick, became a burden rather than a foundation. The first casualty of Cottee's arrival was Graham Sharp. Sharp was a veteran striker who represented everything Everton had been. He had scored 4 goals in a single Division 1 game against Southampton the year before Cottee arrived. Sharp was integral to the title-winning team. He was the established order, a long-standing servant who had achieved great personal success. But Cottee's record transfer disrupted everything. The club had committed £2.2 million, and that economic decision mandated Cottee's continuous selection. Sharp's position was no longer secure, not because his performance had declined, but because the financial investment in Cottee required constant justification. The friction in the forward line was immediate and structural. Cottee's presence disrupted the established order and caused tension between the strikers. Sharp had been a loyal servant, yet the club's high-stakes market purchase meant his future was uncertain. During the 1989-90 season, Cottee managed 13 goals playing alongside Sharp and Mike Newell, but the underlying dynamics remained fraught. This was not simply a personal feud between two competitive strikers. It was an institutional clash between the club's history, represented by Sharp, and his contributions to recent successes, and the demands of the modern transfer market, represented by Cottee, and the financial pressures driving his selection. The tension illustrated a fundamental shift in English football. Player selection was no longer purely about form or team chemistry. Economic necessity now dictated decisions. Sharp was not necessarily displaced due to inferior performance. He was moved aside because the £2.2 million investment in Cottee demanded continuous justification regardless of the effect on team chemistry or the veteran's status. The financial commitment effectively forced Sharp's eventual departure, demonstrating that the friction in the Everton dressing room was not solely a personal issue, but a symptom of larger market forces reshaping the game. Cottee's initial displacement of Sharp established a recurring pattern that would define his career. His entry into a club often resulted in professional instability for existing personnel due to the pressure associated with his high status. The record fee was supposed to bring glory. Instead, it brought division and resentment. While Cottee himself was not responsible for the transfer fee or the institutional decisions that followed, he became the focal point for frustration as Everton's decline continued. After Sharp departed, the situation at Everton deteriorated into organisational chaos. Manager Howard Kendall attempted to revamp the forward line, bringing in expensive talent to arrest the decline. Mo Johnston arrived in 1991 for £1.5 million, another major investment meant to restore glory. Peter Beardsley also joined the squad as Kendall sought to build a new attacking force. Cottee continued producing goals despite mounting challenges. In 1992-93, he scored 12 times and netted Everton's first 2 Premier League hat-tricks. His output never wavered, but the team results spiralled downward. Everton finished the 12th, then 13th. The club was suffering from systemic decline and structural decay. The constant changes in personnel created profound instability throughout the squad. Cottee later spoke about the frustration of navigating evolving dressing room dynamics. Each new signing brought different playing styles, different personalities, and different expectations. The chemistry that successful teams require never had time to develop. Players arrived with fanfare and departed in disappointment. The revolving door of strikers meant Cottee never had consistent partnership or support up front. The Mo Johnston signing exemplified the flawed strategy perfectly. Johnston, despite his expensive £1.5 million price tag and high-profile reputation, soon found himself sitting on the bench. This marginalisation of such a significant investment contributed directly to the undermining of manager Howard Kendall's authority. The failure to integrate expensive talent created a crisis of confidence. Kendall eventually resigned in 1993, unable to navigate the political and sporting challenges. Record low attendance figures reflected the malaise gripping the club. Everton, once a title-winning powerhouse, had become a case study in institutional failure. Cottee was the constant figure navigating this perpetual upheaval. He was an anchor in a whirlpool of mismanagement. Season after season, he provided goals while the club lurched from crisis to crisis. His frustration was intellectual as much as emotional. Cottee realised his persistent goal output was being wasted against a backdrop of organisational decay. Expensive strike partners like Johnston arrived with fanfare and departed with failure. The pattern repeated endlessly. High-profile signings failed to deliver. Managers came and went. The team never found stability or success. This was fundamentally different from the friction with Sharp. In that situation, Cottee's arrival had caused competitive tension. Here, Cottee was the victim of institutional mismanagement rather than the cause of it. He was trying to perform his role while the club collapsed around him. This prolonged exposure to instability and unfulfilled potential likely exacerbated his underlying volatile temperament. The psychological strain of maintaining professionalism while watching expensive project after expensive project fail must have been immense. It set the stage for what would come next. Before we continue, let me ask you, which situation was worse for Cottee? Was it the competitive tension with Graham Sharp, where his arrival forced out a club legend? Or was it the systemic chaos with players like Mo Johnston, where expensive signings undermined the manager and wasted his goals? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. When Cottee returned to West Ham in 1994, it should have been a triumphant homecoming, but the transfer was achieved via a swap deal that sent David Burrows to Everton. Cottee called West Ham home. He quickly scored the first Premier League hat-trick for the Hammers, reaffirming his value and connection to the club. Everything seemed perfect. The prodigal son had returned, but his second debut for West Ham, an away fixture against Liverpool, turned into a nightmare that would define his reputation for years. Just 9 minutes into the second half, Cottee was sent off in circumstances that shocked everyone watching. The victim was Rob Jones, Liverpool's England fullback and an established international player. Moments earlier, Jones had challenged Cottee during open play, but referee Paul Danson refused to award a free kick. The decision decision seemed minor, the kind of judgment call that happens dozens of times in every match. But Cottee became incensed at the referee's refusal. His reaction was not proportionate to the perceived injustice. What happened next was a moment of abject stupidity that overshadowed his goal-scoring return. Cottee launched a hot-headed retaliatory lunge, clattering into Jones as the defender tried to carry the ball away. It was a horrible late challenge with clear intent. There was no attempt to play the ball. It was pure retaliation driven by anger and frustration. Jones was left flat out in agony on the pitch, clutching his leg. The tackle could have caused serious injury. The red card was immediate and unavoidable. Cottee was visibly distraught after the challenge. He appeared obviously contrite, realising immediately what he had done. He had to be physically persuaded to leave the pitch by Liverpool's coach Ronnie Moran and members of the home bench. Later, Cottee tried to dismiss the incident casually as merely a striker's tackle, attempting to downplay the severity. But the footage and contemporary reports told a different story. This was not normal competitive aggression or an unfortunate mistimed challenge. The reaction was wildly disproportionate. A minor perceived injustice, a missed free kick in the first half of a football match, had led to a career-damaging, violent tackle that left an opponent in agony. The incident revealed deep-seated volatility lurking beneath the professional exterior. 6 years of accumulated frustration at Everton had created an emotional burden that Cottee carried back to West Ham. The constant pressure to justify the record fee, the failure to win titles despite consistent personal contribution, and the endemic organisational chaos had taken a severe psychological toll. These years of navigating institutional failure while maintaining goal output had damaged him mentally. Under the high-pressure environment of a symbolic derby debut, this psychological strain surfaced as a destructive lack of control. The red mist had descended completely. The professional striker who had scored 115 league goals for West Ham across his career, who had broken into the team as a teenager and achieved career-best numbers before his Everton move, was also capable of moments of alarming emotional fragility. The duality was stark and troubling. Cottee could score hat-tricks and demonstrate exceptional finishing ability, but he could also lose control completely when faced with perceived injustice or mounting pressure. This volatility suggested that the Everton years had fundamentally changed him, leaving psychological scars that manifested in destructive ways. By 1996, Cottee faced his final major conflict at West Ham. The club was changing dramatically. Manager Harry Redknapp was actively pursuing a high-risk transfer strategy, bringing in high-profile international players to take the team to the next level. The globalisation of English football was accelerating rapidly. Foreign stars arrived with expensive price tags and high expectations. Slaven Bilic, Paulo Futre, Ilie Dumitrescu, and Florin Raducioiu. The strategy represented a fundamental shift in West Ham's approach. Cottee had maintained solid output in the 1995-96 season, with 10 goals as West Ham finished 10th. His consistency remained intact, yet his standing was directly threatened by the influx of foreign talent. Redknapp's vision focused on international flair rather than traditional English reliability. Cottee lost his regular place to new arrivals, specifically Raducioiu and Hugo Porfirio. In the opening months of the 1996-97 season, he was restricted to just 3 league games without scoring. For a striker who had consistently delivered goals throughout his career, this displacement was professionally devastating and personally insulting. Cottee expressed public frustration with manager Harry Redknapp and the new signings. He did not accept his diminished role quietly. This was a stark professional protest against a strategy he viewed as fundamentally flawed. His experience and track record counted for nothing against the allure of foreign imports. The traditional English striker was being cast aside for expensive gambles on international talent. His grievances were soon validated by results. Raducioiu and Dumitrescu were later described as unmitigated disasters. Both failed to justify their price tags or their displacement of established players. Paulo Futre's high-profile signing was brief, injury-hit, and failed to deliver on its promise. The Portuguese winger's arrival had generated excitement but produced minimal impact. Facing near-certain relegation as the flawed strategy unravelled, Redknapp abandoned questioned his foreign policy. He was forced to rely on proven domestic signings like Paul Kitson and John Hartson to secure survival. The expensive international gamble had failed spectacularly, vindicating Cottee's concerns. Cottee was being pushed aside by expensive, high-risk signings who were underperforming by every professional measure. The club prioritised potential over proven quality. Rather than accept a diminished role at his boyhood club, watching inferior players fail while he sat on the bench, Cottee chose to leave. He joined Selangor of Malaysia in October 1996. This was not simply a late career transfer seeking one final payday. It was a total rejection of a managerial strategy that prioritised unproven international talent over the consistent output of a club legend. The cultural clash highlighted the structural tension created for many English veterans by the globalisation of the player market in the mid-1990s. Traditional players who had thrived in the domestic game found themselves marginalised by the influx of foreign talent. Experience and loyalty counted for less than the excitement of signing international names. Cottee's departure represented a breaking point where a proven English striker refused to tolerate being treated as expendable in favour of glamorous failures. Looking back, the pattern is clear and consistent. Cottee's career was defined by exceptional personal output, juxtaposed with relentless institutional and psychological turmoil. The competitive pressure from the sharp situation created division where unity was needed. The organisational decay around Johnston wasted his goals and contributed to his psychological strain. The psychological volatility shown against Jones revealed the emotional damage inflicted by years of frustration. The cultural protest over Raducioiu demonstrated his refusal to accept marginalisation by inferior foreign imports. Cottee was a brilliant striker whose straightforward talent thrived within the defined structures of the 1980s. He understood his role. He scored goals consistently, but his professional trajectory was consistently derailed when those structures dissolved into the chaos of the Premier League era. High-stakes transfers created impossible expectations. Managerial instability prevented team building. Rapid globalisation marginalised traditional English players. These forces created overwhelming turbulence that even exceptional talent could not overcome. Yet, despite everything, despite the conflicts and controversies that marked his career, Tony Cottee's final statistics speak for themselves. He retired in 2001 with 226 league goals from 579 games. His contribution to West Ham across both spells amounted to 115 league goals. These numbers confirm his status as a club legend and a significant transitional figure in English football history. His talent was undeniable, even if the chaos of the modern game constantly threatened to overwhelm it. Cottee remains an important figure, representing both the excellence of traditional English striking and the challenges faced by that generation as football transformed around them. If you enjoyed this deep dive into one of English football's most complex careers, make sure to subscribe and check out our next video on another football legend whose career took unexpected turns.